Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vick, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. We are here in studio today, a little bit short-staffed. Sheriff Wagner is out on the road elk hunting, but Chief Deputy Houchin is here holding down the fort.
Very beautiful, cold Monday morning, isn't it?
It is. We're approaching Halloween, and the weather certainly showed up just in time. So
yeah, tomorrow may be a little chilly for the kidlets to be out roaming around.
yeah, I think that indoor trunk or treat is sounding really nice right now. So anyway, we've made it to a few of those, but I think a few more to go tomorrow. We'll still have people out and about. We are joined in studio today to talk about the LSO Court Services Division by none other than Sergeant Phil Lang. Phil, thanks for being
John.
here.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. We'll talk all things court services here in a few minutes, but before we do that, we wanted to talk about you a little bit. So, Phil, where do you hail from, and how did you come to find yourself at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office?
Well, I was born and raised in Lincoln. I'm the youngest of 6 children to Jack and Shirley Lang. I grew up here, went to Pius High School, graduated in 1987, attended the University of Lincoln, and became a criminal justice major after a year or so of being undecided. But I took some criminal justice classes. They fascinated me. And I decided that law enforcement was the route I wanted to take.
Was 1987 the best class to ever graduate from Pius, or has there been another since?
It was the best class to graduate from.
I have to say, this is actually kind of funny. There's a priest at Pius. Well, he's not there anymore, but he legitimately says to people, if he talks to somebody and they say class of 87, he'll say, you guys were the worst class we ever had at Pius. And I used to think he'd said that to everybody just as a joke.
And then you found out it was
But then I found out that no, he actually does say that. So we must have left a lasting impression on him.
So you're going to have to elaborate on this. Why would you get labeled that, and you and your classmates, Phil?
I think
Statute of limitations probably ran out by now.
Not myself, of course, but I think we had some challenging students in my class. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So
Okay. But you guys have gone on to change the world now. Look, I mean, you're here.
Right. That's exactly right. Exactly right.
So criminal justice, was that something that was on your radar growing up, or is that something you kind of stumbled into? How did that?
Not at all. Actually, when I started the university, I was a business major.
Oh.
And I found out very shortly after starting the business college that it really wasn't for me. So I basically went through a year or so where I was just kind of undecided, still attending, but not really much direction, to be quite honest. Didn't know what I wanted to do, and I took the Intro to Criminal Justice class taught by a professor named Eskridge, and he was a very engaging professor. So it sucked me in pretty quickly. I started taking some criminal justice classes. I enjoyed them. I kind of always thought that maybe I might attend law school, but my father is an attorney, or my father passed away, but my father was an attorney, and he, after some discussions with him, he thought that probably law school wasn't for me. He was honest, and he's probably right. And so I just started taking the criminal justice classes, and I started really becoming interested in it. A guy that was in one of my classes became a deputy sheriff. His name was Steve Thomas, and he had come to the university after attending Iowa. He played football in Iowa. Great guy. And I kind of kept in touch with him. And so he really kind of spurred me to, law enforcement's what I want to do. And so I began the process with both LPD and the sheriff's office. And at that time, they kind of went concurrently together in it. And so I should say concurrently together.
Together, yeah.
Yeah. So the sheriff's office just offered me a job first, I think, and I took it, and I'm glad I did.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
When I started here, you were kind of the godfather of the Special Victims Unit at the time.
Correct.
And then we were in criminal together for a number of years.
Right. I started in 93 at the sheriff's office. I worked obviously patrol. I worked civil division for a while. And then after, I think I was here about 7 or 8 years, I got an opportunity to work in investigations. And I took over the VAWA position, which is basically the Family Crimes Unit.
Yeah, that's Violence Against Women Act. Is that how we funded that?
That's what it stands for, correct.
Okay.
And so I think when I took over, there had been 3 people to do it prior to me, or 2. 2 people had done it prior to me. And at that time, when they allowed me to do that, when they selected me to do that, it was kind of an extended position because it's so specialized. But the 2 people before me had kind of gotten out in about 5 years, if I recall.
Yeah, wasn't it Gus Hitz and Amy Thorpe?
Yes. Those were the 2 that, Gus was the first one.
Right.
And if I recall, they both retired out of they went to different jobs out of the VAWA position, if I recall.
Left LSO, yeah.
Yeah, left LSO. So that there was a written standard of time for that position, but it kind of was like 5 years. But anyway, they let me do it. The sheriff's office let me do it for a long time. I did it for about 9 years. And to be quite honest, I mean, in my own personal opinion, I feel it's probably the most important thing I've done at the sheriff's office. I don't think that, I think my work there was probably the most rewarding and valuable of my entire time at the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it.
I mean, it's certainly a necessary part of what we do, and you don't have to look far to see the effect that you have, because the victims are so vulnerable in that position, and it's not hard to find a reason to work hard on those cases.
Right. I people always ask me how I did it. And it's I mean, the cases would tear your heartstrings out a lot of times, and it was always difficult to work on. But it was also, you can't help a more vulnerable victim than some of the people that I helped in that situation or worked on in cases, and the bad guys that were performing these criminal activities. You know what? I enjoyed arresting them too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I can remember one case where the infant and the guy almost cut the child's tongue off. That is one of them I don't think I'll ever forget on all the cases.
So, like I said, I my time in there really sticks with me. And so I know the case you're talking about. Can I say names? I mean, he was incarcerated. He's still incarcerated. His name's Matthew Wiley. And he had a girlfriend that had a child. He abused that child by basically trying to cut the tongue off this child. And he ended up doing, if I recall, about 3 or 4 years for that.
Yes.
I believe he took some sort of good plea on it, but he ended up only doing about 3 or 4 years. He got out.
Yes.
He found another girl to live with who had a child, and he abused that child also. And that child obtained this was after I had gotten out of the VAWA position, and the next investigator, I believe it was Chad Bryant, worked the case, and he victimized that child, and that child had permanent physical disabilities. I believe
head
damage,
injuries.
brain injuries.
Yes.
And so he's currently incarcerated. He got I believe like a 40 or 50 year sentence.
Pretty lengthy sentence on the second one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I remember these cases.
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones. Yes, I remember he was trying to claim that the child climbed out of the crib, or one of the baby place, and fell and did the damage, and it didn't take very long to figure out that was not it.
Right. Yeah.
Because most of the time, I think I was a sergeant or the captain in the criminal division when you were in there.
When you first came in, you were the sergeant, and Captain Duncan was in there, and then you became a captain, and then it was Sergeant Bleimeister.
Yes.
Came in. So you guys were the ones I worked with primarily through the whole time there.
And then you left criminal, and then you became a sergeant.
I did, yes. I got promoted in 2010.
Wow, has it been that long? Wow.
Oh, yeah. September of 2010 was when I came out of the investigative division. I went back into patrol.
I worked for you on patrol for at least a bid, I think, on days.
Yeah, probably. And, at that point, I decided I was going to try to test to become a sergeant. I felt it was the next step in my career. So that's what I did. And I got it.
So you did patrol for a little bit, and then you've been in, well, I think we worked in courts together when you kind of first came into courts as a sergeant. Mm-hmm. And gosh, that was a long time ago now. Have you been in there? You haven't quite been in there.
Well, so when I first got promoted, I went to the civil division.
Okay, yeah, I forgot about civil too.
Just over 3 years, if I recall.
Yep.
And then I went to patrol, and I was in patrol probably 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been in courts 8-9 years, somewhere right around in there.
Yep. Awesome.
And I enjoy it in there.
Well,
I had never worked in the courts division prior to going in there as a sergeant. And it's kind of odd because, I knew what they did, but until you really work in there, I remember when I went in there, I was shocked at how much they did and how busy they actually are in the courts division.
Yes.
It really shocked me.
And now, all three of us in this room have worked in a supervisory role in courts, and I don't think any of us ever actually worked as a deputy though.
I went there when I first got promoted to captain in 2005. That I was in there for just about 2 years before I went into criminal.
Yep. I think, and part of the reason probably is that it's a little bit more of a senior position as far as seniority. Usually those spots get gobbled up on the bid by more senior folks, and it is a very busy, but I think it's kind of the best kept secret in the sheriff's office to some extent because
well, the older guys would probably say that, yes.
When, I think it hit me when I was in courts, when I was up on second floor and I was looking out that window at the Capitol, like you're looking down Lincoln Mall from the courthouse to the Capitol and snowing outside. And I'm like, oh, I get it. Like this, I kind of like this.
Well, you learn when you're a police officer and working in law enforcement, you learn that having kind of a set schedule and, a little bit more stability in your home life is good.
Yes.
And although it's, that's part of the reason why I like law enforcement though too, is because every day is different when you work out on the road and everything like that, really in courts too. But there's a certain amount of when you get in here and you work in here for a while, then you kind of like, I'm not out on the interstate
working a crash in the snow.
People are piling up behind me and stuff like that. It's
absolutely.
Like, so there's there are definitely good things. Like you said, it's kind of the best kept secret.
If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
So let's talk about the Court Services Division itself.
Okay.
And you guys have a few different missions in there, but I guess the way that I break it down in my head is, you kind of have the court security, building security side of the house, but then you also have, you guys spend a ton of time and miles transporting prisoners to and from court.
Correct.
And then also some of the other specialized duties like title inspection and things like that.
Correct. So basically behind the patrol division, the courts division is the biggest division within the sheriff's department. There's 15, I think, sworn officers in our division. There's a captain and there's 3 sergeants. Then there's 6 front door security individuals. And then there's also 3 individuals that work out at the title station out at 46 on our street.
At the DMV.
Yep. And so there's Captain Whitty is in charge of the courts division, and then Sergeant Moore and myself are the 2 sergeants in there that oversee the building and also transportation of prisoners and extraditions. More specifically, when we're here together, Sergeant Moore is in charge of the building and I oversee all the prisoner transporting and extraditions of prisoners.
So everything outside the walls.
Right.
So to speak.
I also oversee the 3 people that work at the DMV.
Right. So let's talk. I know you were in court just this morning with stuff going on. So what does a typical day look like? We don't have to get into numbers on each floor and things like that, but what does a typical day look like when we're securing the courthouse in Lancaster County?
So the courthouse obviously is partitioned by floor into courts. County court is the 2nd floor. That's basically most of your misdemeanors and your felonies before they get bound over into district court. District court handles, most of your felony crimes. There's 8 district courts and I believe 8 county courts also. Then the 4th floor is juvenile court, which is technically a district court also, but there's 4 juvenile courts up there. So deputies, when we bid twice a year, it's all based on seniority, and the spots in the courts division are specific to time and floor and location as to where you work. So they're bidding into a spot within the courts division. They're not just bidding into the courts division. They're bidding in as a transport officer. They're bidding in as a, juvenile court officer.
Right.
So typically we have 1 to 2 people on 4th floor, and we typically have about 3 people on 3rd floor, and then typically about 4 people on 2nd floor.
Sure.
And that's if we're full.
Yeah. And then you mix and match, obviously, if you have different cases going on, or you might need to shift, resources one way or the other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. We just had a very large sentencing this morning, and it's a case that's been ongoing plea with an individual for a child sexual assault. There was probably 35 people in there and families from both sides. And so in situations like that, we're going to have a pretty good law enforcement presence.
Right.
Because obviously emotions can get high in situations like that. So pretty much throughout all of the hearings of that case.
And then before you even make it up to the courts, though, we've got security checkpoints, and then also like our campus security team that assist people with baggage screening and things like that.
Correct. Those people are overseen by a specific sergeant, Sergeant Cook, that oversees them, and she manages basically the in front of house security.
Yeah.
And they do a great job.
Well, Ben and I were just talking the other day. I mean, we couldn't do what we do without them. I mean, because they secure the campus and the building,
right,
so that we can go out and do the work that we do,
right,
and the work of the courts and the judges and everything else, so that the justice system rolls on.
Right, and they're providing security at the 605 and the 555,
right,
where the
during
the mayor,
business hours anyway.
Yes, when the mayor and the county commissioners and all those are over there, and if a panic alarm is pushed, they're one of the first ones to respond to those incidents.
That is correct, and we get quite a few of those.
Yeah,
I mean that happens quite frequently, and it's basically when one of those comes in, it's all hands on deck. Whoever can get to them as quick as possible. That's how we work those.
So then let's talk about your side of the house a little bit more specifically. Like you said, when you've got Sergeant Moore here with you, you specialize more with the transports and extraditions and things. I've made the joke a couple times that it's kind of the Navy of the sheriff's office because you can see the world. But when we're doing tours, there's a lot of people that don't realize that we travel to all 50 states to go and pick up prisoners.
And that is one of the things that really amazed me when I went into the courts division was just the extent of that process. And yes, that's what I oversee. And it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. And so when I come in the morning, it's more typical than not that there's been somebody arrested in the state of Nebraska on one of our warrants. And so we're responsible for going to pick that person up from that location.
Now, we also pick up the Lincoln Police Department warrants too, don't we?
That's correct.
In the
yes.
state.
Right,
So,
exactly.
So it could be ours, could be the Lincoln Police Department's.
Could be NSPs.
Somewhere. Yeah, that's
Right.
true.
Yes.
But
So-
someone that got arrested that needs to go to court in Lancaster County.
Out of the Lancaster County jurisdiction, yes.
Yeah.
And so again, I supervise the transport deputies that go to those locations and pick these people up and then bring them back and put them in our jails to face whatever charge that they're facing. So that is a daily occurrence, and then also it's a daily occurrence for, let's say, the Lincoln Police Department or the Sheriff's Department here to arrest somebody on an out-of-state warrant from another state. So we call them in-state fugitives. When they are arrested on an out-of-state warrant, technically we don't arrest them on their warrant. We charge them with a crime called fugitive from justice. We complete a probable cause affidavit, and that's what we hold them in our jail on.
See, and I don't think a lot of deputies or anybody knows that part of it. They just think, oh, he had a warrant from Iowa or Kansas or wherever.
So it's amazing, I mean, an officer will make a traffic stop, and within that 5-minute traffic stop, he's communicating with his dispatch, and he's checking that person whether to see if they have a driver's license that's valid, and most of the time checking to see if they have any warrants. So they check them for local warrants, and they also check them for out-of-state warrants if they're good dispatchers and the police officer does a good job in asking for it. All within 5 minutes, they can they'll send out, a teletype saying, hey, anybody want this guy? And those jurisdictions, if they do want this person, will respond, yes, we want them, and yes, we will extradite them. And as long as they will extradite him, we will take that person into custody, charge them with a fugitive from justice from that state, and then we do a probable cause affidavit. And as long as they don't have any new local charges here, they'll get to before the judge usually within a day or two, and then they'll have an opportunity to waive their extradition back to that state.
Now, you were talking, and I don't think a lot of people know this, but you say if they're willing. Can you give us some examples of when a state may not be willing to extradite, or what do you mean by that?
Well, there's parameters that jurisdictions place on their warrants. So most misdemeanor warrants are basically, I guess I'm speaking for the state of Nebraska, typically misdemeanor warrants are going to be in-state only. We're not going to go out of state to pick up a misdemeanor.
We're not going to fly to Florida to pick up someone on a misdemeanor.
Exactly. Yeah. Then certain levels of felonies here in this jurisdiction, if it's a nonviolent, theft, class 4 felony or whatever, you might see a surrounding state only. So we'd go into Iowa, South Dakota, Colorado. We might, Kansas. We'd go across borders to pick that person up if the county attorney has said that's the parameters we're going to put on this warrant.
Yep. Or
the warrant can be nationwide.
And that means we can go to Alaska or Hawaii or wherever.
That means we'd go anywhere to go pick them up.
So just for some of our listeners that may not know, there might be even some people in our own office that don't know, because if you haven't worked in that division, it sometimes it just doesn't register.
Right.
But if there's a crime that's committed in Lancaster County and the sheriff's office investigated, let's use the sexual assault example. So it's a felony crime, probably one that we're going to extradite from anywhere in the country. So I think we just had somebody in New York City, probably, I don't know, was it a few weeks ago already?
Well, just last week we flew down to South Carolina.
Okay, so
that was the $100,000 bar, gold bars, silver bars, and coins and all that.
Walk us through that process. So we investigate the crime here in Lancaster County. We develop probable cause. A lot of times that person's arrested, and then maybe they bond out of jail. So then what happens from there? When someone is, maybe they have a warrant for this Lancaster County case and they're picked up in South Carolina. What's the process?
Okay, so the process is basically the same in any state, and that's kind of what I was touching on. So if a state, John Doe comes here, commits a crime.
Yep.
He comes to his first court appearance. Let's say he gets put in jail, bonds out, comes back to his first court appearance, but then after that he misses a court appearance and they issue a warrant for him, and he flees the state. So let's say he just goes to Iowa to make things easy. So he goes to Iowa. He gets arrested in Iowa. He gets stopped on a traffic stop, just like I described. They run him. They say, hey, look, anybody want John Doe? Nebraska says, yep, we want him. We got a warrant for him because he failed to appear on
And that's probably like our
Child side.
records people at night.
Exactly. It's all done with the teletype. And so they will arrest that person, not on our warrant, but as a fugitive from justice. So as long as he doesn't have any new local charges there,
He wasn't caught robbing a bank or something.
he wasn't caught robbing a bank, they'll probably try to get him before a judge as soon as possible. Now, your bigger jurisdictions, they
Wait your turn. Yeah.
Wait your turn. Exactly. But, typically within a week, you're going to get before a judge if you have no new local charges.
Yep.
And then you have an opportunity to waive for your extradition. They also have the ability to refuse to waive their extradition. So if it's kind of like a two-pronged thing. If they waive their extradition, that starts a clock for us to go get them. That also starts their clock for his jail time. So once he waives, let's say typically we have about 15 days to go pick somebody up.
Couple weeks.
Constitutionally, it's 30 days, but most jurisdictions will give you 2 weeks. But that starts their clock. So let's say it's for a minor theft, a felony, but a theft kind of case. And even if he's convicted, he's probably only going to get, let's say he gets 6 months in jail. Okay. Once he waives, that clock starts, and that 2 weeks will be applied to his credit for time served.
Towards whatever sentence.
Whatever time. Yeah, right.
Okay.
If they refuse to waive, then that starts in a different prong, a different test. And it's then the county that's requesting this person begins what's called a governor's warrant process. And the governor of Nebraska would petition the governor of Iowa to say, hey, this guy is not waiving. This guy, we want him. We want to get a governor's warrant on him. So that starts this big lengthy process. And it's typically about a 90-day process to get a governor's warrant. I mean, not always, but that's average.
You have to validate they are who we think they are.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
all of the things.
So then what that does, though, is it does not start their clock. So they're sitting basically on dead time. So from my experience, we're going to get a governor's warrant. I've never seen them not issue a governor's warrant once they start the process and follow the process through. I mean, I've seen the process stop because the person decided to waive at some point.
Sure.
But once that governor's warrant is received, then we're just going to go get them anyway. And they've been sitting dead for 90 days.
Yeah.
So if they come back here and get a 6-month sentence, they're starting from scratch.
Yeah. So they're serving 9 months rather than 6 months.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
And
there is
that
a
motivates them to do that.
Well, and that's what happens a lot in these cases. You see that happen a lot where they will not refuse to waive, and then they'll go back to jail, and somebody else in jail who knows the process a little bit better will say, if they weren't able to consult with an attorney prior to going before the judge for their waiver hearing, they'll go back to jail, and then somebody at the jail will say, why didn't you waive?
Yeah, sure.
And then they're back shortly after that to, okay, now we want to waive type of thing. So they'll waive and start the process, and we'll go get them.
And so for Iowa, we drive over there and get them.
Correct.
But if it's South Carolina, we put a couple deputies on an airplane.
Right. So like I said, I oversee all of the prisoner transports. So about 20 years ago, the Lancaster County Sheriff's Department got involved in, it's probably 25 years ago, they've got involved in something called the Northwest Shuttle. And the Northwest Shuttle is something that I oversee, I'm part of. But basically what it is, in a nutshell, is it's like the Pony Express for prisoners. And it's a collection or a cooperation of sheriff's offices that will assist other sheriff's departments in moving prisoners to and from locations. Now the Northwest Shuttle, the way it's kind of set up, we've tried to get further east in Nebraska. We can get into Iowa. We can get into Missouri. We actually just kind of got into Indiana, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. But if they're further east than that, then we'll have to fly and go pick them up. But if they're west of us, most of the time, not always, because the shuttle does have some parameters, people, they won't put a juvenile on the shuttle, for example.
Sure.
They won't put a pregnant woman on the shuttle. So there are some medical conditions.
Yeah.
So we would at times have to fly west to go pick somebody up or also travel by.
Also, if they're violent, sometimes they don't like
Right.
to do it. And COVID kind of put a little damper on that program for a while. Is it starting to bounce back up now?
It is, but it is forever changed also. I mean, COVID really affected the Northwest Shuttle because typically when we did this before COVID, jails had to have the ability to house people a little bit longer. There were several agencies that were kind of hubs in states, and they would bring in people from all over the place and hub them and house them for X amount of days until they had to hub them out to different spots. And so a few of those major hubs have not come back after COVID. And so that affected it greatly. I would say that with the exception of a couple areas, it's starting to get back to normal a little bit. It used to be very easy to get somebody out of California, but now it's much more difficult to get somebody out of California. Same with Arizona, but it can be done. I have one coming back from San Diego right now that's been on the shuttle. And to get somebody back from San Diego, I mean, we're talking it's going to take at least 3 weeks probably for that individual to get back to San Diego.
So
get back to Lincoln.
When I got into courts, and I had heard of the Northwest Shuttle, and in my mind, my uneducated mind at the time, I always thought, well, the Northwest Shuttle it's a shuttle. It's this bus that just drives around the country with prisoners on it, but it's really not. It's
in some jurisdictions it is. I mean, some of the bigger hub areas they do,
and they may use a bigger vehicle, but really what it is, Sheriff's Office A is going to drive from point A to point B. They're going to hand off to another sheriff's office in their vehicle.
Correct.
Drive from point B to point C. And so like for our western route, we kind of meet the Scottsbluff County Sheriff's Office a lot of times.
Pretty much weekly.
Yes. And so that's what it looks like. It's not this, big magic bus in the sky. It's individual sheriff's offices that are using.
Depends who's driving.
Oh, I suppose, yeah. But their office, their vehicles, and a lot of times their jails that they have to be, willing partners in that cooperative that you were talking about.
It is absolutely that. There is nothing signed. There's nothing. It's kind of a gentleman's agreement. Now we do have parameters over the years. They've developed these things that we've all agreed to say, yep, these are going to be disqualifiers and these are going to be, and you try not to take advantage of anybody. But because we're part of a cooperative, we're also not going to help necessarily anybody out that just calls us and says, hey, we heard about the shuttle. We want to get them on, can you get them from us from Colorado?
Well, because like you say, we may not have someone in California weekly, but some weeks we will. And so that's why we're putting a little bit of resources in every week so that we can also gain some value back from that.
Exactly.
Yeah, we may go to North Platte and not actually have any of our prisoners or picking up one.
That is absolutely true. 100%. There are times when we do shuttle runs and it's no direct benefit of us for that run. But
you scratch my back, I scratch your back.
What we get out of it, the cost that it saves us. I mean, you don't have to bring very many people back from California for it to pay for itself.
Oh, so certainly.
So people, the airlines, the hotel, the salaries.
I mean, flying somebody back from San Diego we'd send 2 deputies on a flight, hotel. If it was a female,
rental
we'd be
car,
sending a female deputy. So we're talking 2 hotels, rental cars, food. You're talking probably anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 depending on the cost of the airfare. And again, it doesn't take very many of those to help pay offset those shuttle trips where we're not getting something out of it.
Right.
Without a doubt.
So
do you guys use the Marshal Services anymore for prisoners? Because when I was in there, now again, that's been in 2005. We used to use them some, but I don't.
No, not really.
Once in a while, a private company?
Once in a while, a private company, but post-COVID, that's kind of stopped too. Because again, I think they ran into difficulties in housing prisoners. So since COVID, I don't think I've used a private company, but there are a couple of them still working. Okay. So anywhere east of us, other than Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, we'll fly. So you mentioned just last week, I had 2 deputies that flew down to South Carolina to the Spartanburg area and pick up a prisoner. And they spent the night, came back. They put that individual in jail last week. But we do a lot of flying ones too. I mean, I bet you we do probably 2 flying extraditions a month.
And I bet most people, when they're flying to South Carolina, maybe don't even notice the 3 people in the back of the airplane and one of them in handcuffs.
That is correct. I mean, there's obviously a process in place when you transport, when you use a commercial airline to transport a prisoner. The sheriff's office used to have their own airplane. I don't know when they...
Larry Russell is actually joining us for an upcoming episode on the aviation unit, so he's going to talk about that very thing.
Okay.
But
right. When I started, we still had the plane for several years.
I think 2000, well, the sheriff was talking... We sold the plane right around September 11th.
The day they were supposed to come the day after September 11th
to check it out.
And I don't know if they made it or not. Well, I don't think they did because nobody could fly at that point in time.
So probably 20 plus years now we've been using commercial air to transport prisoners.
Wow, I didn't think it had been that long.
Yeah,
but right. So again, flying commercial with deputies, and the deputies fly armed. So being able to do that is a whole process that has to be done with the Federal Aviation Commission. They have to obviously get permission. It's a process that, I start and hopefully complete before they have to let go.
Yeah.
But yes, you mentioned they're always in plain clothes when they transport these individuals. We try to keep the individual restrained. Now, most airlines won't let you have ankle shackles on somebody for safety reasons, which I understand, but we will try to have a belly chain on them with handcuffs in front. We have some altered clothing that we can secure the individual and put them in this clothing, and it basically just looks like they have their hands in their pockets.
Yep.
And so typically when we do a flying extradition, again, the airlines know that, hey, we got a couple of armed law enforcement officers on here. Yes, they're transporting a prisoner. They're typically the first ones on the plane and the last ones off the plane, and they're usually in the back.
Low profile.
Yeah.
Well, we won't get into every single security measure that's taken, but it is a lengthy process, and certainly one that we don't take lightly.
One thing that a lot of people don't know is if the pilot says no, you're done.
Yeah, it's his or her plane.
They got the final say.
The pilot is the king of the castle, but knock on wood, I've never experienced that.
Right.
They, in my opinion and from my experience, because I've obviously done several of these also, they kind of like it when you're on the plane, I think. You will be the first one on the plane. You typically get introduced to the pilot.
Right.
The stewardess will bring you into the cockpit and say, these are our Leos. And again, from the paperwork that's been filed, they know we're on the plane. They know our names.
You're on the manifest.
And per the training that we have to attend prior to doing that, we don't get involved in any activity on the plane unless we're requested to get involved.
You're not an air marshal.
We are not an air marshal. But if there is an air marshal on the plane, they will introduce it to us, or another law enforcement officer on the plane that's armed.
Yeah.
They will introduce us to them and show us where they're sitting so that there is no confusion.
Right.
Yeah, if a gun comes up, they know who's
if
on
something
who's.
does happen. Correct.
Yeah. Before you leave, we don't want to leave titles out of this. When you go to the DMV and you're getting your license plates and things, there's always a bright gold badge hanging up on the wall out at 46th and R. Why? What are they doing?
So when somebody purchases a vehicle from out of state, and the state title is from a different state,
from Iowa,
a dealer that might bring a car in, or a a private individual buys a car from out of state and has an out of state title. They have to bring that vehicle and that title in to be inspected. And then once that process is completed, they will issue a Nebraska title for that vehicle. And then that individual can take it over to the DMV section of that building and get their plates for that vehicle and get it registered in the state of Nebraska.
One thing that I didn't realize until I took the training, we have some deputies that take the title inspection training, but there are a number of states in the country that have kind of looser title regulations and laws than others. And some criminals will actually use those states or route, stolen vehicles through those states to what's called wash a title.
Well, especially a salvage title, correct?
Yes.
And so the people that we have out there are are very skilled at watching out for that sort of thing, and
Extremely skilled.
and trying to.
There's a lot of experience out at the 46th and R.
Well, yeah, I mean, and they've been doing that work for years and years. But hopefully, in addition to detecting crime, we want to make sure that people here aren't being taken advantage of by, some stolen vehicle or something that they're sold, not realizing what it is.
That's correct. And that's what that process will hopefully uncover. Just last week, one of my guys from out there called me and said, "Hey, just so you know, we got a hit on a VIN for stolen out of state." I can't even remember what state he said it was from. And that happens quite frequently. Yeah. And 99% of the time, it's usually some sort of clerical error that on the end of the state where the vehicle came from. And it just needs to be straightened out.
Well, because it may have been reported stolen, they don't take it out of the system.
Exactly.
And then we get it and it gets the smack then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, closing thoughts, Phil, on court services.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just close with my description of the sheriff's office, because I know that this whole process is to make people aware of what we do here in law enforcement. I know that I'm just one cog in the wheel of this entire department. But law enforcement is a great career. The sheriff's office is a great department to work for. I honestly, if I would have gotten hired for the Lincoln Police Department, I don't know if I'd still be a police officer today. I've loved my time here. It's small enough to where it still has kind of a family feel to it here at the sheriff's office, but we're also big enough that we're progressive. We do a lot of cool things. We have a lot of cool opportunities to the people that we employ here. And so if you're thinking of a career in law enforcement, I think that the sheriff's office out of Lancaster County is definitely someplace you should put on your list to apply.
Well said. Well,
yeah, great bosses too, right?
Great bosses.
Well, Phil Lang, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today on the 902 podcast, and stay safe.
Okay. Thanks, John.
And with that, Phil Lang has left the studio. We really appreciate the time that he spent with us today to talk about the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office Court Services Division. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to listen to other episodes, be sure to subscribe and follow wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. If you're interested in career opportunities at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, be sure to visit us online, www.joinlso.com. You can also reach out to us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and also on TikTok. At LSO Nebraska is where you can find us across all social channels. Lastly, if you'd like to get in touch with us via email, have a question, maybe a thought or suggestion for a future episode, lso@lancaster.ne.gov is where you can find us on email. We appreciate you listening. Hope to catch you next time.